Timing is about initiating your swing at a specific point in the ball's trajectory, not about making contact with the ball at that point. If you do that, you'll always be too early. Alright team, the heavy backspin push is a shot that gives amateur players a lot of trouble. When you face this shot, is your first instinct to loop it or just to push it back? Consider this: why not use a sidespin topspin serve? With a sidespin topspin serve, if your opponent attacks it, you can immediately start a topspin rally. This is much better than getting a difficult-to-loop ball back from a push exchange. If your opponent can still push your serve, it's a sign that it wasn't a true sidespin topspin serve. You must have the determination to engage in rallies and counterattack. Once your topspin game is strong, you have more options. If you can't win the backspin exchange, you can switch to a topspin battle. That's why amateur players really need to learn how to serve a quality sidespin topspin. Today we're talking about handling push rallies, so let's first focus on how to add quality to your push. In a push rally, if you just passively touch the ball and it lands short, your opponent will loop it every time. That's not effective. So, how do you prevent them from attacking? The first key is to push the ball long. Watch how a long push immediately jams my opponent. However, if all your pushes are half long, it becomes very easy for your opponent to find their timing and loop. The first key point: when pushing, use your forearm to send the ball deeper. A long ball is much harder for them to attack. By pushing long, you can jam your opponent and significantly increase their error rate. The second key point: in a push rally, avoid trying to add force with abrupt, snappy motions. This leads to errors. Your priority must be stability. Focus on getting the ball on the table and keeping its trajectory low. This is the key to a consistent push rally. Third key point: vary your placement when pushing. For example, after pushing to the middle, suddenly push wide to their forehand to open up a bigger angle. During push rallies, you must practice moving your opponent around. Alternate between the wide lines and the middle. We are often too predictable with our pushes. Some players say they get looped when they push to the forehand. What's the reason? First, it's because your forehand placement isn't wide enough. If you can push to a wider angle, it becomes much harder to loop. The issue is insufficient placement. Now, let's talk specifically about looping. Which ball do you think is easiest to loop? A return off your serve, a ball from a push rally, or a return from your own third ball attack? Actually, the return after your third ball attack is the easiest to loop, because it's the simplest and has the lowest quality. This is why I strongly recommend you practice your serve and attack game. Only by being bold enough to initiate can you master the rhythm of the third ball attack. Don't be afraid to attack because you fear making a mistake. The error rate in a passive push rally is often just as high. Let me explain why balls from a push rally are so difficult to loop. First, during a push rally, it's hard to push the ball deep. Instinctively, players just poke at it, so the ball is almost always half long. While a long serve or an aggressive long push can go deep, the ball in a typical push rally often ends up half long. The second reason it's hard to loop is that the rhythm of a push rally is very slow, which causes many amateurs to rush their timing and fail to generate power. Because the pushed ball is already short, it also drops very quickly once it passes the end of the table. The forward momentum of a pushed ball is completely different from a served ball. That's why when you try to loop a pushed ball, you feel like you can't use your power, and you often hit it into the net. A push uses a short, sharp motion, unlike a full stroke that drives forward. So, a pushed ball drops much faster after leaving the table, similar to a return from long pips. This demands the highest level of timing and forward engagement, which are the two things we often lack. Whether it's a forehand or backhand loop during a push rally, you must wait for the ball. Looping on the fall will make it much easier. In a push rally, if I want to loop, I wait for the ball. See how much easier that is? If I try to rush and hit it at the peak of the bounce, the ball feels incredibly heavy and I can't generate any power. I believe looping on the fall is the most suitable timing. The ball is slower, allowing you to synchronize your upward swing with the ball's downward path. Trying to loop from behind the ball at the peak of the bounce requires a very high skill level. In a push rally, if the ball comes to your forehand, just wait for it. It becomes much easier to loop. For example, swinging at the highest point of the bounce, that's a high point loop. Waiting for the ball to drop before I swing, that's looping on the early part of the fall. You absolutely have time to loop a pushed ball because it's very slow. A topspin ball might require you to react in 0.2 seconds, but a backspin push gives you 0.6 seconds. Don't use topspin timing for a backspin ball. Let's be clear, the timing point refers to when you initiate your swing. For instance, hitting on the rise means you start swinging the moment the ball bounces. High point timing means I start my swing when the ball is at its peak. Early fall timing means I start my swing after the ball begins to drop. Timing is about initiating your swing at a specific point in the ball's trajectory, not about making contact with the ball at that point. If you do that, you'll always be too early. If you aim to make contact with the ball right at its peak, you will always rush the shot. You think you need to contact the ball at its peak, but for a slow backspin ball, the time it spends at its peak is quite long. If you try to time your contact and swing simultaneously for the peak, you'll inevitably hit the ball before it even gets there. We've always assumed that on the rise or at the peak refers to the moment of contact. But that's incorrect. True rhythm means starting your forward swing from your backswing as the ball reaches its peak to go meet it. That's how you truly match the timing. It's not about the moment of contact being at the peak or on the fall. Your swing speed is always faster than the ball's speed. Even with a slow swing, you can guide the ball over. However, incorrect timing will prevent you from generating any real power. The second issue is forward engagement. Because a pushed ball has no forward momentum, you must learn to loop by driving into it. Let me illustrate. You need a different loop technique for an aggressive long push, a standard push rally ball, and a passive block. Players who like to hit hard and drive forward often struggle against an opponent's aggressive long push. Players who tend to lift the ball struggle against soft balls that offer no pace to work with. Therefore, you must adjust the direction of your power when you loop. For a very fast, driving ball, you can use its pace and drive more forward and upward. For a ball from a push rally or a soft block that has no pace, you must drive forward into the ball to create your own power. When I loop, if I only lift up, the ball goes into the net, right? Let me explain the physics behind why that happens. A heavy push has immense backspin. When it hits your racket, it wants to dive downwards. If your upward motion doesn't make solid contact, your racket just slips over the ball. The friction is not effective. You're grazing the ball instead of driving through it, which causes it to go into the net. The best solution for netting the ball is to ensure you brush with solid contact. Really, bite the ball with your rubber. To achieve this, all your brushing motions must be led by the forearm, which engages the wrist. Your forearm has to be active. Relying only on the fingers and wrist doesn't provide enough force to get solid contact. You need your forearm to help drive forward into the ball. This is how you create that feeling of a solid, brushing contact. I have to move forward to meet the ball while simultaneously brushing it to generate the necessary arc. If you just brush from a static position, it might feel like you're using your arm, but the ball is already gone. The rest of your follow-through is a useless, empty motion. You must break this mental barrier. Our instinct is to lift up on heavy spin and back away from fast balls. This is wrong. Against a fast ball, you must block forward and jam them. Against a heavy spin ball, you must have the courage to drive forward and brush it solidly. Remember the sequence for a proper loop: forward, then upward. It's not upward, then forward. If you only go upward, you can't drive forward through the ball. Why did it hit the net? Because you went upward, and you rushed the timing. Looping at that contact point in a push rally will result in an 80% error rate. If you realize you've rushed the timing at the high point, I'll teach you a trick to save the shot. What this means is, if you realize your contact point is too high, immediately extend your follow-through high up, above your forehead. For instance, if I'm looping the ball at its highest point against heavy backspin, this adjustment will at least get the ball over the net. Don't just stop at your standard follow-through position. If I do that, even I will hit the net. You must learn to make mid-swing adjustments. If the ball is short, move your body in. If it feels like it's going long, direct your swing more sideways. If you sense it will hit the net, lift your follow-through high, towards your head. A standard stroke is just the foundation. In a match, you face countless problems. The only correct stroke is the one that gets the ball on the table. Now, try looping at the high point again, but use this adjustment. This isn't about lifting the elbow, it's about the forearm moving upward. That's right. Make sure you don't flip your elbow, those are two completely different concepts. You're just extending your normal swing path slightly higher. You must learn to adapt. If your footwork is off and the ball jams you, you can't just give up. Adjust your body and find a way. At higher levels, 99% of the balls you receive will be awkward. You have to learn to handle and solve these difficult situations. While you should aim for correct technique, in a match, don't be obsessed with perfect form. Anything can happen. If you feel the ball is going to go long, direct your swing path towards your left shoulder instead of continuing upward. Let me show you. Swing towards the left shoulder, and it's impossible for the ball to go long. Simply put, it's about controlling the length of the arc. More upward motion gives you a higher arc. More forward motion gives you a flatter, shorter arc. There is no single standard stroke. For instance, if an opponent's push is extremely spinny, I will also use my upper arm to help lift the ball. Otherwise I can't create enough of an arc. Loop on the fall while driving forward. If you still hit the net, the problem isn't your forward motion, it's your brushing contact.